The sky over the frozen expanse of Great Slave Lake was the color of old bruises, purple and gray bleeding into one another as the late afternoon light struggled against the coming storm. Marcus Reeves felt the cold seeping through the cab of his Kenworth, even with the heater blasting at full power. 42 degrees below zero, the dashboard thermometer read, and that was before accounting for wind chill. He'd been driving ice roads for 17 winters, and he still couldn't get used to the way the cold turned everything brittle, the way it made metal scream and rubber crack, the way it reached into your chest and squeezed your lungs with invisible fingers. The radio crackled with the familiar voices of the convoy behind him. 4 trucks in total, spaced at the regulation 300 meters to prevent resonance waves from building in the ice beneath them. Too close together, and the combined weight could set up harmonic vibrations that would crack even the thickest ice sheet like a pane of glass under a hammer. Marcus had seen it happen once, back in his 3rd season, watched a truck punch through perfectly good ice because some rookie had tailgated another rig and created a standing wave. The driver had made it out barely, but the truck had gone down in seconds, swallowed by black water that was somehow darker than the winter sky above it. "Reeves, you copy?" The voice belonged to Tommy Hutchins, a younger driver who'd been running the northern routes for maybe 5 seasons. Competent enough, but still carrying that edge of bravado that hadn't been ground down by experience yet. "Weather Service is saying this front's moving faster than predicted. We should pick up the pace." Marcus keyed his mic, keeping his eyes on the ice ahead. The surface was smooth here, swept clean by constant wind, but he could see the subtle variations in color that told him where the ice was thickest. Darker patches meant thinner coverage, often over underwater currents that never fully froze. Lighter, almost white sections indicated solid ice, sometimes 4 feet thick, enough to support a loaded semi at highway speeds. "Negative, Tommy. We hold at 40 clicks. Ice is singing today, and I don't like the look of that pressure ridge at marker 17. "Singing?" Another voice cut in, this one belonging to Pete Kowalski, the convoy leader driving a bright red Western Star about 900 meters ahead of Marcus. Pete had seniority, had been running these routes since before Marcus earned his commercial license, and he carried that authority in every word. "The ice is fine, Reeves. Temperature's been steady for 3 weeks. We've got a delivery window in Yellowknife, and we're already running tight. Keep your speed up." Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he didn't argue. Pete was technically right about the temperature. The cold had been relentless and consistent, building the ice sheet day by day until it was thick enough for the winter road to open. But Marcus had learned to trust more than just thermometers and safety reports. He'd learned to listen to the ice itself, to feel the vibrations through his steering wheel, to watch for the telltale signs that something beneath the surface wasn't quite right. The ice was singing, a low harmonic hum that he felt more than heard, and in his experience, singing ice meant stress, meant the sheet was flexing and settling in ways that didn't show up on thickness measurements. The load behind him was 64,000 pounds of mining equipment, drill bits and hydraulic components destined for a gold operation north of Yellowknife. Critical supplies, expensive cargo, and Marcus's responsibility to deliver intact. He'd been hauling freight across frozen lakes and rivers for most of his adult life, had built a reputation for reliability that was worth more than gold in this business. Never late, never damaged, never through the ice. That was his record, and he intended to keep it that way. The landscape around him was a study in monochrome, endless white stretching to every horizon, broken only by the dark line of the plowed ice road cutting across the frozen lake. Trees lined the distant shores, black spruce bent and twisted by endless wind, their shapes barely visible through the ice fog that rose wherever open water met frozen air. The sun, when it was visible at all, was a pale disk hanging low in the southern sky, casting long shadows that turned every small irregularity in the ice into a potential hazard. Visibility was maybe 2 kilometers on a good day, less when the wind kicked up enough to create whiteout conditions. Marcus checked his mirrors out of habit, saw nothing but white behind him, the next truck in the convoy too far back to be visible in the gathering gloom. He liked it that way, preferred the isolation that came with driving these remote routes. Out here, it was just you and the machine, your skills against the environment, no room for error or second guessing. You made decisions fast and lived with the consequences, good or bad. That was the job, and after 17 years, Marcus couldn't imagine doing anything else. The radio crackled again. All units, this is dispatch. We've got a situation developing. Single truck reported through the ice approximately 42 kilometers north of your position, junction where the main route splits toward the mining camps. Details are limited, but rescue teams are mobilizing from Yellowknife. Estimated response time is 90 minutes. Repeat, estimated response time is 90 minutes. Any units in the area, please respond. Marcus felt his stomach drop. 42 kilometers north. That was right on their route. Probably 25 minutes ahead at current speed. A truck through the ice meant a driver in the water, maybe already hypothermic, maybe unconscious, definitely running out of time. In water that cold, you had maybe 10 minutes of useful motor function before your muscles seized up and you couldn't swim or climb. After that, you had another 10 or 15 minutes before your core temperature dropped enough to stop your heart. If you were lucky enough to get out of the water, you had maybe 30 minutes to get warm before frostbite turned your extremities into dead tissue. Copy that, dispatch. Pete's voice came back immediately. Convoy Alpha is approximately 25 minutes out. We'll divert and provide assistance until rescue arrives. All units, increase speed to 60 clicks. Maintain spacing. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. 60 kilometers per hour on ice was asking for trouble, especially with a loaded truck, especially with the ice already stressed and singing the way it was today. But a driver was down, someone was dying out there in the cold, and time was the only currency that mattered now. He pressed the accelerator, felt the Kenworth's diesel engine respond, the tachometer climbing as his speed increased. The vibration through the floorboards changed pitch, a deeper thrumming that he felt in his chest. The ice was definitely singing now, resonating with the increased weight and speed, but it was holding, for now. Reeves, you with us? Tommy's voice on the radio, higher pitched than usual, adrenaline sharpening his words. Roger that, Marcus replied. Increasing speed, maintaining spacing. But even as he said it, Marcus was scanning the ice ahead, his mind working through calculations that had become instinct after so many seasons. The main route followed the safest path across Great Slave Lake, the thickest ice, the most predictable conditions. It was the route that had been surveyed and approved, the route that every truck used, the route that minimized risk. But it also meant following the same path as everyone else, which meant dealing with the rough ice that developed after hundreds of trucks had passed over the same stretch, creating ruts and pressure ridges that slowed you down. And there was that pressure ridge at marker 17, a bulge in the ice where two sheets had been forced together by thermal expansion and wind pressure. Navigating it would cost time, maybe 5 or 6 minutes, time that the driver in the water didn't have. But Marcus knew these lakes, had spent 17 winters learning their patterns and peculiarities. He knew there was another way, a route that skirted the eastern shore of the lake, following shallower water where the ice was often smoother, more consistent. It was longer in terms of distance, maybe 8 kilometers more, but it avoided the rough sections and that problematic pressure ridge. If the ice was good along the shore, if conditions held, he could make better time, maybe a lot better time. The problem was that the shore route had a reputation. Shallow water meant more variable ice thickness, meant areas where underwater springs or current could create weak spots. It meant driving close to land, where ice could be compromised by thermal effects from the shore. It meant taking risks that most drivers avoided, especially with a heavy load. And if you got stuck or went through the ice out there, you were alone, away from the main route, away from the convoy, away from help. It was the kind of decision that ended careers if you got it wrong, the kind of call that people remembered and talked about for years. Marcus could already hear the voices on the radio if he announced his intention to take the shore route. Pete would probably order him to stay with the convoy, would cite regulations and safety protocols and common sense. Tommy and the others would think he'd lost his mind, would question his judgment, would probably make jokes about it for the rest of the season. But Marcus had learned to trust his instincts, had learned that sometimes the smart move looked stupid from the outside, and the stupid move looked smart until it killed you. He'd driven the shore route before, had checked it out during earlier runs this season, and he knew the ice there was good, maybe better than the main route in some sections. The question was whether it was good enough, and whether he was willing to stake his reputation, his cargo, and possibly his life on that assessment. The radio crackled. All units, dispatch. Updated information on the incident. Single truck is a fuel hauler. Went through at the junction approximately 38 minutes ago. Driver is out of the vehicle but injured. Exposure is critical. Yellowknife rescue is en route, but weather is slowing response. Current ETA is 75 minutes. I repeat, 75 minutes. 38 minutes ago. That meant the driver had been in the cold for half an hour already, maybe longer. If he was injured, if he couldn't move, couldn't generate heat, his time was running out fast. Marcus did the math in his head. At current speed, following the main route, they'd arrive at the junction in maybe 20 minutes, call it 22 with the pressure ridge slowdown. But if Marcus took the shore route, if he pushed his speed up to 70 clicks on the smoother ice, if his assessment was correct and the conditions held, he could be there in maybe 12 or 13 minutes, 9 or 10 minutes faster. Maybe the difference between life and death for the driver in the water. Or maybe the difference between Marcus delivering his cargo and Marcus going through the ice himself, taking 64,000 pounds of equipment and his 17-year reputation down into the black water. It was a gamble, and Marcus had never been much of a gambler. But he thought about that driver, alone in the cold, feeling his body shutting down degree by degree, watching his own fingers turn white and useless, knowing that help was coming, but maybe not coming fast enough. He thought about arriving at the scene 20 minutes from now to find a body instead of a survivor, knowing that he'd had a chance to get there faster and hadn't taken it because it was risky, because it looked stupid, because it went against protocol and common sense. Marcus made his decision. He keyed the mic, keeping his voice level and professional. "Pete, this is Reeves. I'm taking the shore route, cutting over to the eastern track past marker 12. Ice conditions look solid, and I can make better time on the smooth surface. I'll meet you at the junction." The response was immediate and predictable. "Negative, Reeves. Stay with the convoy. That shore route is not approved for heavy loads. You'll be on your own out there." "Copy that," Marcus replied. "But I know that ice, Pete. I've run it 3 times this season for practice, and it's good. Better than good. I can shave 10 minutes off the transit time, maybe more. That driver doesn't have 10 minutes to spare." "Jesus, Reeves." Tommy's voice this time, disbelief evident. "You're going to risk your truck and your cargo on a hunch? That's insane. The main route is proven. It's safe. What happens when you punch through and we have 2 drivers down instead of 1? Marcus felt a flash of irritation but kept it out of his voice. "I'm not punching through. The ice is 40+ inches along the shore, been checked and rechecked all season. I'm making a calculated decision based on 17 years of experience on these lakes. You all do what you need to do. I'll do what I need to do." There was a moment of silence, broken by a burst of static. Then Pete's voice came back, colder than the air outside. "Fine. It's your call, Reeves. But if you go through that ice, don't expect us to risk our trucks trying to fish you out. And when you're late to the junction, because that shore route turns out to be slower than you thought, don't blame us for not waiting. You're on your own." "Understood," Marcus replied. He saw the turnoff approaching, a barely visible gap in the snowbank that marked where the shore route diverged from the main track. "I'm making the turn now. See you at the junction." He eased the Kenworth toward the gap, felt the surface change as his tires left the packed ice of the main route and moved onto the smoother, less traveled shore track. The difference was immediate and striking. Where the main route had been rutted and rough, beaten down by hundreds of trucks passing over the same ice, the shore route was smooth as glass, the surface almost pristine. The wind had swept it clean, leaving only a thin dusting of snow that crunched under his tires with a sound like grinding glass. Marcus accelerated carefully, feeling for the response of the ice beneath him. The Kenworth's weight was distributed across 18 wheels, spreading the load, but 64,000 pounds was still 64,000 pounds, still enough to stress even thick ice if conditions weren't right. He watched his speed climb, 50 clicks, 55, 60, 65. The ice wasn't singing anymore, at least not the same stressed harmony he'd felt on the main route. Instead, it made a different sound, a deeper resonance that felt more stable, more solid. He'd learned to read these vibrations the way musicians read sheet music, had learned to distinguish between the dangerous frequencies that meant the ice was flexing and the safer tones that meant it was holding firm. The shore appeared on his right, a dark line of trees maybe 200 meters away, their shapes indistinct in the gathering dusk and ice fog. Marcus kept his distance, knew that getting too close to shore meant risking thinner ice where geothermal effects and underwater springs could create weak spots. But he also knew that being too far out meant dealing with deeper water and more variable conditions. The sweet spot was about where he was now, close enough to benefit from the shallower water, but far enough to avoid the thermal problems. It was a narrow margin, but Marcus had made a career out of finding those narrow margins and exploiting them. His radio had gone quiet, the other trucks presumably following the main route, dealing with their own challenges and making their own time. Marcus didn't mind the silence. It gave him room to focus, to listen to the ice, to feel the subtle feedback through his steering wheel that told him everything he needed to know about the surface beneath his wheels. The Kenworth's suspension was stiff enough to transmit every variation in the ice, every small crack or pressure line, and Marcus had learned to read those sensations like a blind man reading Braille. The light was failing fast now, the brief Arctic afternoon giving way to the long winter night. Marcus switched on his headlights, watched the twin beams stab out across the ice, illuminating a cone of white that extended maybe 50 meters before being swallowed by darkness and ice fog. His GPS showed his position on the lake, a small blue dot crawling across a vast white space, the shore route marked in red as an alternate path. The main route showed as green, with the other trucks of the convoy visible as small icons moving along the approved track. Marcus was already ahead of them, his gamble on the shore route paying off as his speedometer held steady at 70 clicks, faster than the convoy could manage on the rougher main route. But speed came with its own risks. At 70 kilometers per hour, Marcus was covering almost 20 meters per second, which meant he had about 2 seconds to react if he saw a problem in the ice ahead. 2 seconds to decide whether to brake, swerve, or power through. 2 seconds between safe transit and catastrophe. His hands were locked on the steering wheel, his eyes scanning constantly, looking for the telltale signs of bad ice. Darker patches that might indicate thinner coverage. Snowdrifts that could hide cracks or pressure ridges. Changes in surface texture that might mean a transition from solid ice to something more treacherous. The cold was a constant presence, seeping into the cab despite the heater's best efforts. Marcus's breath formed clouds in the air whenever he exhaled through his nose, and he could feel the chill radiating off the windows, could see ice crystals forming on the inside of the windshield anywhere the defroster's hot air didn't reach. His coffee had gone cold in its thermos, and the sandwich he'd brought for dinner was frozen solid in its wrapper. Even his heavy winter gear, the insulated coveralls and thick gloves and balaclava, couldn't fully protect him from the cold that pressed in from all sides. This was cold that could kill in minutes if you were exposed to it. Cold that could freeze exposed skin in seconds. Cold that made metal brittle and rubber crack and fuel gel in your lines if you weren't careful. Marcus checked his gauges. Fuel was good, more than half a tank. Engine temperature was holding steady in the green, the diesel staying liquid thanks to fuel additives and heat from the engine block. Oil pressure was normal. Air pressure for the brakes was within spec. Everything was working the way it should. The Kenworth's mechanical symphony playing in perfect harmony. But Marcus knew that could change in an instant. A fuel line could freeze and starve the engine. A brake line could rupture from cold-induced brittleness. A tire could blow out on a patch of rough ice. 1,000 things could go wrong, and out here, alone on the shore route with the convoy kilometers away, any one of them could be fatal. The GPS showed he'd covered about 6 kilometers on the shore route, which meant he was roughly a third of the way to the junction. His speed was holding steady, the ice conditions remaining good, better than he'd expected. The surface was smooth enough that he could feel every tiny irregularity through the steering wheel, could sense the places where the ice was thickest and strongest. He was making excellent time, probably already 5 or 6 minutes ahead of where he would have been on the main route. But he still had 12 kilometers to go, and conditions could change fast on the ice. A pressure ridge could appear out of nowhere. A weak spot could open up without warning. The weather could deteriorate into a full whiteout that would force him to slow down or stop entirely. The radio crackled back to life, startling Marcus out of his focused concentration. "All units, this is dispatch with an update. Yellowknife Rescue is reporting significant delay due to weather. Updated ETA is now 95 minutes. Repeat, 95 minutes to on-scene arrival. Can any units provide updated status?" Pete's voice came back, strained and frustrated. "Dispatch, Convoy Alpha is approximately 15 minutes out, maintaining maximum safe speed. Ice conditions on the main route are deteriorating. We're dealing with significant rough patches and pressure ridges that are slowing progress. Current ETA to junction is 18 minutes, maybe 20. 18 to 20 minutes. Marcus checked his own GPS. He was 11 kilometers out, traveling at 70 clicks, which put him at about 9 or 10 minutes to the junction. Call it 8 or 9 minutes ahead of the convoy, assuming his speed held and conditions remained favorable. That was significant time, maybe enough to make a real difference for the driver in the water. But it also meant arriving alone, dealing with the situation without backup, making critical decisions without the input or support of the other drivers. It meant being first on scene, which could be an advantage or a curse depending on what he found there. "Dispatch, this is Reeves." Marcus kept his voice steady, professional, hiding the tension he felt coiling in his gut. "I'm on the shore route, approximately 9 minutes out from the junction. Ice conditions are excellent, maintaining speed at 70 clicks. I should be first on scene. Will assess situation and provide immediate assistance as able." There was a pause. Then dispatch came back. "Copy that, Reeves. Be advised, first responder protocols for ice rescue are in effect. Do not attempt water extraction without proper equipment and backup. Assess, stabilize, and wait for additional units. Acknowledge." "Roger, dispatch. Assess, stabilize, and wait." "Understood." Marcus clicked off the mic, his mind already racing ahead to what he might find at the junction. A fuel hauler through the ice meant a potential environmental hazard, thousands of liters of diesel or gasoline leaking into the lake. It also meant a driver who'd been in extreme cold for close to 45 minutes now, long enough for serious hypothermia to set in, long enough for frostbite to do permanent damage to extremities. If the driver was conscious and mobile, Marcus might be able to get him into the warm cab of the Kenworth, might be able to start the slow process of bringing his core temperature back up. If the driver was unconscious, injured, or trapped, things got a lot more complicated and a lot more dangerous. The ice ahead of Marcus changed character slightly, the smooth surface giving way to a section with more snow cover, drifts that had formed in the lee of some underwater feature that created turbulence in the wind. Marcus eased off the accelerator, bringing his speed down to 60 clicks, not wanting to risk hitting a hidden obstacle at high speed. The snow crunched and compressed under his tires, and he felt the Kenworth suspension working harder, absorbing the uneven surface. His headlights caught swirls of blown snow dancing across the ice, patterns that appeared and vanished in the space of seconds, hypnotic and disorienting. Then, without warning, visibility collapsed. One moment Marcus could see 50 meters ahead. The next he was surrounded by white, a complete whiteout that reduced his world to the interior of his cab, and a few meters of ice illuminated by his headlights. The wind had shifted, was now coming from the northwest, picking up loose snow and hurling it horizontally across the frozen lake. Marcus instinctively slowed further, down to 40 clicks, then 30, his eyes straining to see anything through the wall of white. The GPS was his only reference now, the blue dot on the screen showing his position relative to the shore, the junction still 8 kilometers ahead. This was bad. This was the kind of condition that killed experienced drivers, that made the ice roads so dangerous, even when the ice itself was solid. In a whiteout, you lost all sense of direction, couldn't tell where the safe route was, couldn't see hazards until you were right on top of them. Drivers had been known to veer off course in whiteouts, to drive in circles until their fuel ran out, to go through the ice because they couldn't see the dark patches that indicated thin coverage. The only way to survive a whiteout was to slow down, trust your instruments, and be ready to stop completely if necessary. But Marcus didn't have time to wait out the storm. Somewhere ahead, a driver was dying by degrees, his body shutting down in the cold, his window for survival shrinking with every passing minute. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter, forced himself to breathe slowly and evenly, to focus on the GPS and the subtle feedback from the ice beneath his wheels. He kept the Kenworth moving, maintained a steady 30 clicks, even though every instinct screamed at him to stop, to wait for visibility to improve. His headlights were almost useless now, reflecting off the blown snow and creating a disorienting glow that made it impossible to judge distance or see obstacles. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Marcus's neck and shoulders ached from the tension, from holding his body rigid against the seat, ready to react in an instant. His eyes burned from the strain of trying to see through the whiteout, but there was nothing to see, just endless white in every direction. The GPS showed him creeping along the shore route, still making progress toward the junction, but at this speed it would take another 15 minutes to get there, which would erase most of his advantage over the convoy. But there was no choice. Trying to maintain higher speed in zero visibility would be suicide. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the whiteout ended. The wind shifted again, the curtain of blown snow moved off to the east, and Marcus found himself looking at clear ice ahead, his headlights once again reaching out across the frozen surface. He immediately accelerated, bringing the Kenworth back up to 60 clicks, then 65, then 70. The GPS showed 5 kilometers to the junction. At current speed, maybe 4 minutes. He was going to make it, was going to be first on scene, was going to have a chance to make a difference. The radio crackled. "Reeves, this is Pete. Where are you? We lost your signal during that whiteout." "I'm on the shore route, approximately 4 minutes out from the junction," Marcus replied. "The whiteout slowed me down, but I'm back up to speed. Ice conditions are good. What's your ETA?" 14 minutes, maybe 15, Pete said, and Marcus could hear the frustration in his voice. "We hit a bad pressure ridge at marker 17, had to slow to a crawl to get over it. Cost us almost 10 minutes. If you get there first, Reeves, do what you can, but don't be a hero. Wait for backup if the situation looks bad." "Roger that," Marcus said. But he knew that advice was worthless. If the driver at the junction was in trouble, Marcus wasn't going to wait. He couldn't wait. Not when every minute mattered. Not when he'd made this detour specifically to get there faster, to have a chance at making a difference. The whole point of taking the shore route, of risking his reputation and his cargo, had been to arrive in time to help. Waiting for backup would defeat that purpose, would make the risk meaningless. The GPS showed 3 kilometers to the junction. Marcus pushed the Kenworth harder, got his speed up to 75 clicks, dancing on the edge of what was safe on ice. The cold air was cutting through the cab now, seeping in through every gap and seal, turning the interior frigid despite the heater running at maximum. Marcus's fingers were numb inside his heavy gloves, and he could feel the beginnings of a headache from the cold and the tension. But none of that mattered. What mattered was getting to the junction, finding the driver, doing whatever needed to be done. 2 kilometers out, and Marcus started to see signs of the accident. Dark streaks on the ice, drag marks where something heavy had been pulled or slid. Then debris, scattered pieces of wreckage, torn metal and broken plastic scattered across the ice like confetti after a parade. A tire separated from its rim lying on its side. A section of bumper, chrome twisted and bent. Marcus's chest tightened. This looked bad. Looked like the kind of accident where the truck hadn't just punched through the ice but had rolled or flipped before going down. That meant the driver might have been thrown clear, or might have been trapped inside when the truck sank. 1 kilometer. Marcus could see the junction ahead now, the place where the shore route merged back with the main route, marked by tall stakes with reflectors. And there, just past the junction, he could see the dark hole in the ice where the fuel hauler had gone through. The hole was maybe 10 meters across, irregular in shape, the edges jagged where the ice had fractured and given way. Around the hole, the ice was discolored, stained with diesel fuel that was already beginning to freeze into a viscous sludge. The smell hit Marcus even through the closed cab, the sharp chemical reek of petroleum products. Marcus brought the Kenworth to a stop about 50 meters from the hole, far enough away to avoid any compromised ice but close enough to work from. He grabbed his emergency kit from behind the seat, a waterproof bag containing thermal blankets, flares, a first aid kit, rope, and a handheld radio. He pulled on his heaviest parka, checked that his gloves were secure, and pushed open the door. The cold hit him like a physical blow, a wall of frigid air that sucked the warmth from his body and burned his exposed skin. 42 below, maybe colder with the wind. Deadly cold, the kind that could freeze flesh in minutes. Marcus moved quickly across the ice, his boots crunching on the frozen surface, his breath forming clouds that were ripped away by the wind before they could fully form. His headlights illuminated the scene, casting long shadows that danced and shifted with every gust. As he got closer to the hole, he could see the extent of the damage. The fuel hauler had gone through rear first, the cab tilted up at an angle before the whole rig had been pulled down by the weight of the tank. There were deep gouges in the ice leading up to the hole, showing where the driver had fought to keep control, had tried to brake or steer away from the weak spot, but hadn't been fast enough. Then Marcus saw him. A figure lying on the ice about 20 meters from the hole, motionless, partially covered by blown snow. Marcus ran, his lungs burning as he sucked in the frigid air, his legs pumping as he crossed the remaining distance. He dropped to his knees beside the figure, his gloved hands brushing away snow to reveal a man's face, pale and blue-tinged, eyes closed. The man was wearing a standard winter parka, but it was soaked through with water from the lake, frozen stiff in the cold air. That was bad. Meant the man had been in the water, meant his core temperature was probably dangerously low. Marcus pressed his fingers against the man's neck, searching for a pulse. There, faint but present, a weak flutter that told him the driver was still alive, but barely. Hypothermia, advanced stage, probably unconscious for 20 minutes or more. Marcus knew the protocols, had been trained in cold water rescue and first aid. Get the victim out of wet clothes, wrap in thermal blankets, provide external heat, monitor vital signs. But all of that assumed you had time and proper equipment, neither of which Marcus had right now. What he had was 4 minutes before the convoy arrived, 4 minutes to stabilize this driver enough to give him a fighting chance. Marcus keyed his handheld radio. Dispatch, this is Reeves. I'm on scene at the junction. Driver is out of the water but unconscious. Advanced hypothermia. I need immediate medical evacuation, but in the meantime, I'm going to warm him in my truck. Convoy is about 13 minutes out. Over. The response was immediate. Copy that, Reeves. Medical evac is en route from Yellowknife, but ETA is still 65 minutes due to weather. Do what you can to stabilize, but do not attempt to warm too quickly. Rewarming shock can stop the heart. Keep him conscious if possible, and monitor breathing. Acknowledge. Roger, dispatch. I understand the risks. But if I leave him out here, he's dead in 10 minutes. I'm moving him to my cab now. Marcus clicked off the radio and set to work. He spread one of his thermal blankets on the ice, then carefully rolled the unconscious driver onto it. The man was heavy, dead weight, his limbs stiff and unresponsive from the cold. Marcus wrapped the blanket around him, then grabbed under his arms and started dragging him toward the Kenworth. Every meter was a struggle, the weight and the cold sapping Marcus's strength, but he kept moving, kept pulling, one step at a time. By the time he got the driver to his truck, Marcus was gasping, his muscles screaming from the exertion in the cold air. He managed to get the cab door open, then hauled the unconscious man up into the passenger seat, a feat of strength that left Marcus shaking and dizzy. He cranked the heat up even higher, directed all the vents toward the passenger seat, then grabbed more thermal blankets from his emergency kit and wrapped them around the driver. The man's face was still pale, lips blue, but Marcus thought he saw a slight improvement, a faint color returning to the skin around his eyes. Marcus grabbed his medical kit, found a small LED pen light, and checked the driver's pupils. They reacted sluggishly to the light, which was good, meant there wasn't severe brain damage from oxygen deprivation. He checked the pulse again, found it slightly stronger, though still slow and irregular. The driver's breathing was shallow but present, his chest rising and falling in weak, irregular patterns. Marcus positioned him in the recovery position as best he could in the confined space of the cab, made sure his airway was clear, then covered him with every blanket he had. The radio crackled. "Reeves, this is Pete. We're 8 minutes out. How's the driver?" "Alive, but critical," Marcus replied. "Unconscious, hypothermic, but vital signs are present. I've got him in my cab, trying to warm him slowly. When you get here, I'm going to need help securing the accident site and dealing with the fuel spill. There's diesel all over the ice." "Copy that. We'll bring containment equipment." A pause, then Pete's voice came back, different now, lacking its earlier coldness. "Reeves, that was good work getting there first. You may have saved his life." Marcus didn't respond, just stared at the unconscious man in his passenger seat, at the pale face that was slowly, gradually regaining some color as the heat from the cab seeped into his frozen body. The man's eyes fluttered, and Marcus leaned closer. "Hey, buddy, can you hear me? You're safe now. You're in my truck. Help is coming. Just hang on." No response, but the breathing seemed to strengthen slightly, and Marcus saw the fingers of the man's right hand twitch inside the frozen glove. That was progress. That was the body starting to function again as warmth returned. Marcus knew they weren't out of danger yet, knew that rewarming could cause cardiac arrest if done too quickly, knew that frostbite damage might already be severe enough to require amputation. But the man was alive, was responding to treatment, and that was more than Marcus had expected when he'd first seen that motionless figure lying on the ice. The minutes crawled by as Marcus monitored the driver, checking pulse and breathing every 60 seconds, watching for any sign of distress or deterioration. The man's color continued to improve slowly, the blue tinge fading from his lips, replaced by a healthier pink. His breathing deepened, became more regular, and Marcus saw his eyelids flutter again, this time with more strength. Then the eyes opened, unfocused and confused, staring at the ceiling of the cab without comprehension. "Easy," Marcus said softly. "You've been in an accident. Your truck went through the ice, but you got out. You're safe now." The man's eyes found Marcus, focused on his face with visible effort. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He tried again, managed a weak croak. "Cold. So cold." "I know," Marcus said. "But you're warming up. Just rest. Don't try to move too much. Help is almost here." The man's eyes closed again, but his breathing remained steady, and Marcus felt a surge of relief. He was going to make it. Against the odds, against the cold, against the time pressure, this driver was going to survive. Because Marcus had taken the shore route, had made a decision that everyone thought was reckless, had arrived 18 minutes faster than the convoy following the approved route. 18 minutes that had made all the difference. Headlights appeared in the darkness, the convoy's trucks arriving at the junction in a line. Pete's red Western Star pulled up behind Marcus's Kenworth, followed by Tommy and the others. Doors opened, and drivers emerged into the cold, moving quickly toward Marcus's position. Pete reached the cab first, pulled himself up to look at the driver in the passenger seat. His weathered face showed surprise, and something that might have been respect. "He's alive," Pete said, and it wasn't a question. "Yeah," Marcus replied. "Barely, but yeah. He's going to need immediate medical attention, probably going to lose some fingers and toes to frostbite. But he's alive. Pete looked at Marcus for a long moment, then nodded slowly. That shore route of yours. I guess you knew what you were doing after all. I guess so, Marcus said. He was exhausted, his body shaking with a combination of cold and adrenaline crash. But he felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with being right and everything to do with the fact that the man beside him was breathing, was alive. Would see another morning because Marcus had trusted his instincts and taken a risk that paid off. Tommy appeared at the door, his young face serious for once. Dispatch says medical evac is 40 minutes out. Weather's clearing and they're making better time. We've set up containment booms around the fuel spill, shouldn't get too much environmental damage. Is there anything else we can do? Marcus shook his head. Just keep him warm and monitor his vitals until the helicopter gets here. I'm going to move my truck away from the accident site. Give them room to land. He carefully repositioned the driver in the seat, made sure the blankets were secure, then climbed down from the cab and walked around to the driver's side. As he started the engine and prepared to move the Kenworth to a safer distance, he caught a glimpse of the other drivers gathered around the accident site, working quickly and efficiently in the brutal cold, their headlights and flares creating pools of light in the darkness. This was the Ice Road Brotherhood, drivers who might mock each other on the radio, but who would risk everything to help when it mattered. It was why Marcus had spent 17 years doing this job, why he kept coming back winter after winter despite the cold and the danger and the loneliness. The helicopter arrived 37 minutes later, a bright yellow air ambulance from Yellowknife that touched down on the ice with rotor wash that sent snow flying in all directions. Paramedics jumped out with their equipment, moved quickly to Marcus's truck, and took over care of the driver. Marcus gave them a quick briefing, watched as they loaded the man onto a stretcher and carried him to the helicopter. The pilot gave a thumbs up, the rotors spun faster, and then the helicopter lifted off, banking away to the south, carrying its precious cargo back to warmth and medical care and safety. Pete walked over to where Marcus stood watching the helicopter's lights fade into the distance. The older driver was quiet for a moment, then spoke without looking at Marcus. I was wrong about the shore route, about you taking that risk. You saved that man's life today, Reeves. 18 minutes faster might not sound like much, but it was everything. Marcus nodded, accepting the acknowledgement without pride or smugness. It could have gone the other way. Ice could have been bad, could have had my own truck through. But sometimes you have to trust your experience, trust your instincts. That's what this job is about. Yeah, Pete agreed. That's what separates the veterans from the rookies, knowing when to follow the rules and when to break them. You made the right call today. He held out his hand, and Marcus shook it, feeling the strength in the older driver's grip, the respect that came from years of shared experience on the ice roads. The convoy regrouped, the drivers climbing back into their cabs, preparing to continue the run to Yellowknife. Marcus's Kenworth was still loaded with 64,000 pounds of mining equipment, still had a delivery window to meet, still had a job to complete. He climbed into his cab, fastened his seatbelt, and put the truck in gear. The passenger seat was empty now, the thermal blankets folded and stowed, but Marcus could still smell the diesel fuel and cold water, could still see that pale face slowly regaining color in the heat of the cab. As the convoy moved out, following the main route toward Yellowknife, Marcus keyed his radio one last time. Dispatch, this is Reeves. Driver has been evacuated by air ambulance. Accident site is secure. Convoy is resuming northbound transit. ETA to Yellowknife is approximately 2 hours. Copy that, Reeves, dispatch responded. And Reeves? Good work out there. That driver's family is going to be very grateful you were there. Marcus clicked off the mic without responding, but he felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the heater. He'd taken a risk today, had made a decision that could have ended his career or worse, but he'd trusted his experience, had read the ice correctly, had gotten there in time to make a difference. That was what mattered, in the end. Not being right, not proving anything to anyone, but simply being there when it counted, making the hard calls, and living with the consequences. The Kenworth's engine hummed steadily as Marcus guided the heavy truck across the frozen lake, the headlights cutting through the darkness, the ice singing its harmonic song beneath his wheels. Ahead of him, the convoy's lights stretched out in a line, a string of bright points moving through the Arctic night. Behind him, the junction and the accident site faded into the distance, already becoming just another story that would be told and retold in truck stops and dispatch offices, another piece of ice road legend. But Marcus knew the truth. It wasn't about the 18 minutes, wasn't about being first or being right. It was about understanding that sometimes the safe choice isn't the best choice, that sometimes you have to trust yourself even when everyone else thinks you're making a mistake. It was about reading the ice, feeling the conditions, making the call that your experience tells you is right, even when it goes against common wisdom. That was the art of driving ice roads, the skill that separated survivors from casualties, the knowledge that came from 17 winters of learning hard lessons on frozen lakes. Marcus checked his mirrors, confirmed the convoy was maintaining proper spacing, then settled in for the long drive to Yellowknife. His hands were steady on the wheel, his eyes scanning the ice ahead, his mind already thinking about the next decision, the next judgment call, the next moment when experience and instinct would be the only thing standing between success and disaster. This was his world, these frozen roads, this brutal cold, this constant dance with danger. And despite everything, despite the risks and the cold and the loneliness, he wouldn't trade it for anything. If you found this story compelling and want to experience more dramatic, true-to-life narratives from the world's most extreme professions, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another story of split-second decisions, incredible courage, and the people who risk everything in the world's most unforgiving environments. Your subscription helps us bring more of these untold stories to life. Subscribe now and join us for the next journey into the extreme.